Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to part 4 of our introduction to the dynamics of astrology. Hello, hello, hello,
Hi.
hello. Are you well?
Yes, good.
Yes, good. Right, excellent. Now, um, where were we? Yes, we ended last time by looking at the history of Western thought through the lensing of planets, and found that there's a rumor that when mankind first looks upon a planet, it signifies the dynamics or experience of human consciousness in that moment. And we found it seems like there's something in it. And you might remember that when we talked about the discovery of Pluto, there were 2 dates. There's the official discovery date, which was in 1930, but before that, Lovell thought he'd found it in 1915, but dismissed it because it was too small. And that happened to be the very year that Albert Einstein first presented his general theory of relativity. So there was something in 1915 after all. So in a sense, we've transitioned our understanding of why things fall down by going from Newton's idea of gravity to Einstein's idea of space-time. But I have a question for you all. This will be an open mic verbal responsive question, if you would. And that is this. How would a parent in the 13th century explain to a child why things fall down hundreds of years before the notion of gravity existed? Children have always been
Probably something to do with. Well, if I didn't know, I'd explain it that it's the same way rain falls or something. Maybe they'd draw parallels with rain falling.
But why does rain fall? You haven't answered the question at all. You just
No, I know.
you're just
I don't know.
listing things that fall.
Maybe they would use God as a reason.
Maybe. Could you tilt your camera forward a bit so that we can see the top, bottom of your chin? That's it. That's it. We can see it now. Yeah. So, any ideas, anyone, apart from God?
No idea, David.
No?
No, I haven't either.
Okay. Well, the Greeks had a model, which was rather cool. You see, the Greeks believed that reality, the physical world, was made up of 4 elements. These were earth, air, fire, and water. And by earth, they meant all things physical. Everything physical. And by so the tangible, the sensual world, smells and tastes as well. That's all the physical, tangible world, right? Air is the element of thought, of ideas, of communication. Thoughts swirl around. The air swirls around. The air is never still, and the mind is never still. Fire, the element of action, drive, power, fire, of doing. And water. Water goes in and out. Water has a surface. Water has ripples. Water has a crescendo. Water has depth. Water has undercurrents. Water has hidden depths. Water can bring life. Water can drown you. Water is the element representing emotions and feelings, the hidden realms, the clairvoyant realms, the mystical, the mystery. So their model was this. Every element is seeking its natural home. All physical things belong on the earth. So therefore, everything physical goes to the surface of the earth. That's why things fall down, right? Water is returning home to the sea. So tears come down your face. Water comes down from the sky. A spring will come up from the center of the earth and go along the surface, going down towards the sea, you see. Air is going back to the sky. So that's why steam goes upwards and incense rises, smoke rises, and all fire is seeking its home, which is the sun. That's why everything hot goes up. What do you think of that as a working model?
I think it's pretty cool.
It's
works.
very cool. Yeah, it does work. It does stack up.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the framework, or a model. There might have been others, there probably were others, but that was a working model until Newton superseded it with his, one single force, and then Einstein, superseded that with his notion of space-time, which hasn't yet been superseded. So we have these different paradigms of comprehension, all of which in their own time frame seem to make sense. 1,000 years from now, we might be laughing at how simplistic we see things, and they will be going, ha ha, they believe this stuff, Yes, but however, whatever you believe now, that is where you are. So let's have a little bit more of a look at these kind of elements in a sense and see, is the world made of these things? From the perspective of just observing the world, it does seem to be that way. Hold on a moment, let me just click this. So here's some Earth. There's some kind of, I do, well, I'm not going to apologize for my childish cartoons because that's what they are. But there's a bit of land, as it were, a bit of kind of brownish soil with some green grass sitting on top of it. The stuff that we eat and plant. And we can add another element in here. So there's one element there, right? Right.
Yes.
Okay. And let's add another one. Now we have water.
Okay.
Aha. So now we have two elements. But in actual fact, I've not been completely honest with you. Because in this picture, there are two elements here. And in this picture, there are three elements. Because the air is present, right? But we haven't got a picture of the air because the air is invisible. So just to kind of represent the air, I'll put a bird in there, right? So now you know that there's some air, there's a thing where the bird is, right? And of course we have fire in the center of the earth. And the fire in the center of the earth is, in a sense, a bit of cooling down, blobbed off sun. So when the star exploded and the debris from the exploding star started to orbit what was left of the new star that was forming, which we now call the sun, little bits of rock started to stick and collide with other bits of rock. And as they stuck and got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, they started to create gravity fields of their own. Some of them, as we know from last week, achieve hydrostatic equilibrium, which means their mass is so big that it pulls them into a sphere, and then you get planets. And that's how our solar system got going. So the heat of the stuff at the center of the Earth comes from this heat up here. Now, if you want to get to the light, let's say you want to find enlightenment. I don't know, you might not. Some of you through your lives might be actively seeking enlightenment. Others might just be stumbling upon it. But if you were to wanting to seek enlightenment, you got a choice in a way. You can find the highest mountain of your aspirations, wherever they may be, and reach up to the light, reach up to the gods, whatever is your goal in life for you, whether that's knowledge or wisdom or athletic prowess or money or whatever kind of goal it is you're after, right? Find the highest point that takes you up there and then reach up to the gods, and you might find you can ascend in the way that you wish. But you can also get a shovel and dig deep down into the center of the earth and find the light in the heart of things. So it's possible to find the light of aspiration by looking up and out beyond yourself. And it's also possible to find the light of aspiration by closing your eyes and looking deep within yourself. And I found over the years that studying astrology on your own is a very insular thing to do. And it kind of starts to become a thing where you know about your own chart as best you can, but you don't know about anybody else's. And why would you? You know, learning in a group means, just by pure courtesy and good manners, that we have to explore other people's charts as well as our own, because they're here, they're in the room. And that means that you stretch your knowledge and appreciation of the human condition outside, beyond the confines of that which you already know. You will find that other people genuinely process information more quickly than you do. Wow. You'll find other people genuinely process information more slowly than you do. And you'll find verity and merit in both, because they're not better or worse, they're just different. The person who finds divinity in the garden, pottering in the garden, the intellectual might look through the window of the university library and see the gardener in their little way, in their humble kind of sense of joy. But if you go a few corridors along to the neuroscience lab, the guys in the neuroscience lab will have an envy for the person who's got their hands in the soil, because it's been discovered there's a bacteria in soil. And when you're planting carrots and you're planting your cabbages and you're doing work in your garden, the bacteria in the soil stimulates the release of serotonin in your brain, and it actually makes you high. Genuinely. The person who thinks, I shall leave the library and stop studying in the library and I shall go for a walk in the woods, they're doing the same thing too, because it's been discovered that leaves have a chemical on them that when it falls and it touches on human skin, it has an interaction in the same way that ultraviolet produces vitamin D by the interaction it has with human skin, right? The chemical that falls off leaves touches human skin and again reduces cortisol, produces a release of the opioids in our brain. So if you walk across fields, you feel good, but if you walk in the woods, you feel wonderful. So if you go for a woodland walk and then do some gardening afterwards, you're having a really good life, right? The intellectual in the university looking through the window might not have that knowledge. The person doing the gardening might not have that knowledge, but that doesn't mean to say they're not happy about it. So when we look at other people's lives, it's not necessarily an easy thing to be able to form some kind of opinion about their world without having insider information. And the wonderful thing about astrology is that it can give you insider information, meaning that you can reach inside another person's world. And some people might hold the view that they are a Taurus or a Gemini or a Capricorn, right? And they'll see their relatives and that they've got a cousin who's a bit weird and an uncle who no one talks to and all this sort of thing, right? And because they know their cousin is called Sun in Gemini and the weird uncle is called Sun in Aquarius, they think all Geminis are like their cousin because their cousin is the ambassador of Gemini. Whatever Gemini is, that's what their cousin is. Therefore, that's what Gemini is. And they start to kind of form character type associations with names of signs of the zodiac, not realizing, of course, that because the sun it is very close to Mercury. There's the sun with Mercury next to it. When we look at the sun, we also have Venus and Mercury in between where we are, the point of observation, and our star, which is where we get these kind of annular, kind of monthly characteristics from. So it's possible, because Mercury can never go too far out from the sun from the view observation. It's never more than 72 degrees away in a chart. It's possible for a person's sun to be in one sign, but then Mercury is in a different sign. Mercury is the planet of thinking, of vocabulary, of how we listen, but also how we speak. I've got the sun in Aries in my chart, but my Mercury is in Pisces. So although my sun's in Aries, I think and sound like a Pisces. So when you listen to me, if you find my voice at all engaging, or if you ever find my voice a bit relaxing, that's the Pisces dynamic. It's nothing to do with Aries at all. So naming me as an Aries completely misses the point of who I am. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Good. Right. Okay. Now, it's possible that we find that some people have dynamics similar to us, but by different positions in a birth chart. For example, if somebody has Venus in Capricorn, if you describe the dynamics of Venus in Capricorn with that person, you know, they're kind of strange paradox of having a fear of poverty, but coupled with a joint of ownership. There's a weird one. Whereas actually, it's not that weird. It's very common for a lot of people to kind of be frightened of poverty, but at the same time feel really guilty about spending money on themselves. You know, I've spent something on the house. I bought something for work. I bought something for Christmas, someone else's birthday. Did you spend any money on you? No. Right. Are you worth it? Oh, yeah. But yes. But for some reason, if I buy something for myself, I have to sneak it past people and not let them know that I bought something for myself. Some people are like that. And there are some people have that kind of disposition when they have Venus in Capricorn. Another person can have exactly the same disposition because they have Venus in the 10th house. And another people can have exactly the same disposition because Saturn is square or opposing their Venus. So what you find in the language, the complexity of the astrological language, is that other people can have similar dynamics that you have, but yet their chart placements are different. So one person might have Saturn in Leo, another person will have Saturn in the 5th house. They'll have something in common between each other, even though one's got Saturn in Leo and the other one hasn't. Okay? So how you can relate with other people, you'll find that as you start to get into astrology, perhaps get the birth charts of your nearest and dearest, perhaps get an astro software that I'd recommend, and start to kind of, experiment and look at these things yourself. You start to find patterns and themes and threads in people's lives. And it is very common, of course, for friends to find something mutual between their charts. That's why you're friends in the first place. Because birds of a feather do tend to flock together. It just seems to kind of be a bit like that. Now, before we start to get into the nitty-gritty of things a bit more deeply, a question for you all. How many people here understand why moon phases happen? We get new moons, we get full moons, you get daylight moon rises. Does anybody here understand the astronomy of actually how that takes place? That's a yes/no question.
No.
No.
No?
I mean, I have read up on it lots of times, and to say I can't give you a completely honest answer. I'll get it all wrong on record.
Okay.
So you can enlighten us.
Yeah. Now it can be a bit of a thing for some people, you see, because essentially it's a 4-dimensional working model. It's objects in space and time, like height, breadth, width, and time, 4 dimensions. I know New Age people who say that they're ascending to a 5th dimension, and they go from 3D to 5D. I want to know what happened to number 4. If someone says to me, we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 5, I start to mistrust their logic because they've got something missing. And for some reason, people don't take time to think about time. I think it's about time. We thought about time. Yes, maybe it's time we should. So how this moon phase thing happens. Now, in handout number 1, I think it is, there's a little diagram of a moon phase. Looks like this. And this is a 2D version, I guess. In earnest, it's correct. If that's the Earth in the center, when the sun and the moon are next to each other, we say that's a new moon. And when the sun and the moon are opposite each other and the earth is in the middle, we say that's a full moon. But that doesn't necessarily explain how or why these things take place. So perhaps this might help. Here's our chap. Night bathing, he's moon bathing. The sun here is underneath the horizon. If we think this is the horizon, so hold on. So in this diagram, the sun is on the other side of the world. So it's midnight where the sun is, right? So this is what it's like. For example, if you live in the UK, this is what it's like when it's midday in Australia. So the light of the sun shines on the southern hemisphere, and because the light of the sun hits the sides of the earth, the light beams out beyond the earth. But this side of the earth is in shadow. So when the sun is in the southern hemisphere, people in the northern hemisphere cannot see the sunlight because the light cannot bend around the surface of the earth. Okay? But if you have an object that's far above the surface of the earth, think of it like a glitter ball, right? So there's a glitter ball in space, and the light from the sun touches the sides of the glitter ball, and it sends a beam of light back down to the surface of the earth, and the person sitting here experiences what he calls moonlight.
Yeah.
Right. Are you aware that the moon has no light?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
It's a dead rock.
Mm.
Right? There is no light that comes from the moon. Light comes from the sun because the sun is a star. Right? The sun is a constant lump of nuclear explosions blasting out photons. The moon is a passive rock. So when the light of the sun touches the surface of the moon, it's reflected back down to the earth. But that only takes place when the moon is above the surface of the earth. Because the earth goes around the sun, we experience the sun as if it forms a revolution on a daily basis. It's actually us spinning. We remember that, right? Okay, so from our perspective, it seems to us as if the sun rises and sets, and rises and sets, and rises and sets. But the moon is also rotating around the earth at a faster speed as well. So sometimes the moon is close to the sun, and then sometimes the moon will move away from the sun and come up above the surface of the earth. When the moon is above the surface of the earth, we can see it at night because the light of the sun touches it. When the moon is next to the sun, the moon seems to disappear. And the reason is because it's moving close to the sun. Let's just show you what that looks like. So here's the moon next to the sun. So when the sun is below the surface of the earth, illuminating the southern hemisphere, people in the northern hemisphere can't see the sun, but they can't see the moon either, because the moon is also moving through the sky of the southern hemisphere. When the sun comes up above the horizon, you still can't see the moon, because when the moon is next to the sun in daylight, the sun is so bright, so dazzling, it literally whites out the reflected light of the moon, so you can't see it visibly. Okay, so far?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I have a helpful diagram just coming up. All right. I just want to know you're following the stepping stones. Okay. Yeah. Good. All right. Now, here's a diagram of exactly the same phenomenon. Now, how many of you have ever seen a thin crescent moon in the sky?
Yeah, looks beautiful.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Are you aware that what you're looking at is not a new moon?
Yes.
Because the moment that the moon is new, the moon is next to the sun. So if you look at this diagram here, I've put the sun at the bottom as a reference point, just as a reference point. So the inner circle, for the moment, will say that this is a lunation cycle, right? So when the moon is next to the sun you can't see it. You can only see the moon when it's moved 30 degrees away from the sun. And you see in the diagram here, you start to see this thin crescent of light. See that where the cursor is? Yeah. So when the moon is next to the sun, we can't see it because by daylight it's dazzled out. And by nighttime, of course, it's on the other side of the world. By the time the moon has moved 30 degrees away from the sun, there's enough of an angle for that reflected light to reach the eye of someone standing on top of the surface in the northern hemisphere. Okay?
Yeah.
All right. Then the moon moves another 30 degrees away from the sun, and now we can see a much larger crescent. When the moon moves to being 90 degrees away from the sun, the light of the sun now is reflected on half of the moon's surface. That's what we call a first quarter moon, because it's moved a quarter of the circle. Okay, so far?
Yes.
Brilliant. When it moves another 30 degrees, now you notice that it's almost as if the shadow is a crescent, because that's essentially what's happening. So the light is moving across the surface of the moon, and the shadow is being pushed away. So by the time you get to 150 degrees away, now we have a white moon with a crescent of shadow, just exactly the opposite of what it was like when it was 30 degrees. So this is 30 degrees from the conjunction when they're next to each other, and this is 30 degrees away from opposition when they're in exactly opposite. And you get the same patterning. There's a crescent of shadow, here's a crescent of light. And then the moon is opposite the sun. And when the moon is opposite the sun, we call this an opposition. In terms of lunation cycles, we have new moon, first quarter, full. You can see the full face of the moon. And it continues moving. So when the moon moves away and begins to disseminate, you now see, 30 degrees later, that now the white light is receding and the shadow is returning, and you see a crescent of shadow. Or actually, when you look through a camera or your eye, when you look at it, you don't see the shadow because it's dark, right? You just notice that the round ball isn't quite round anymore. It's kind of gone a bit sort of squiffy, like there's a bit missing, right? Which is how it seems. And of course, the light continues to recede, which means the shadow continues to grow. You get to third quarter, and now you can see half of the moon, but also half of the moon has vanished. Continue another 30 degrees, there's more shadow than light. Another 30 degrees, now there's a tiny thin crescent on the other side of the moon, because it's just about to disappear. And then, whoosh, the moon goes vanish. We don't see it for a few days, and then it reappears again after it's new. And that is a lunation cycle. Is that clear?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, you found that okay?
Yes.
Okay. Now we're going to throw another layer of depth or complexity into things. Right? I want you to pretend now that instead of the inner cycle here being a lunation cycle, that it's a solar cycle, a cycle of the sun. Bear with it a moment, right? Just imagine, right, that when you were born, an angel was hovering above your head, right, miles up in the sky, and they got a celestial kind of felt marker and went on a bit of sky, right, and they marked the point where the sun was when you took your very first breath. Now, we know that there's 360 degrees in a circle, and the Earth moves around the sun at a certain speed, which, from the viewpoint of Earth, seems as if the sun moves through 1 degree of the zodiac every day. So it's like the sun goes, and approximately 360 degrees later, it occupies the points in the sky that it occupied when you took your very first breath. The sun has returned. Astrologers call this the solar return. The sun has returned. And society calls this your birthday. I think that's behind the phrase, many happy returns. Many happy returns.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. The moon takes 28 days to go around the Earth. Every 28 days, you have a lunation return. Right? You notice this? Of course, you do.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because, all females tend to have a fluidic tidal experience when they have their personal lunar return, right? But men are made of water too. We're also 80% water, us men. And although we don't leak in a fluidic sense, it does come out in our behavior. And we have a lunar tick. We have a lunar tick takes place when there's a full moon sometimes. You can't help but notice it. If you talk to nurses, they will say, oh yeah, casualties full of people, always busy on a full moon. If you talk to the management, they say, no, that's a fallacy. It's just a rumor in society. When I started getting into astrology in 1991, I phoned up Broadmoor Mental Prison Hospital thing, and I got through to the management and I said, can you confirm that on full moons, your staff are never always doing overtime because you're busier, because the people get a bit more jittery on a full moon? And they said no comment. But the reason I phoned them is because a guy I was talking to told me that he used to be a kind of a nurse at Broadmoor, and this was the case. So I phoned the management to see if they could verify it, and they said no comment. So I thought, okay, it will just have to be an anecdotal rumor for now, right? But people do report these sorts of things, that certain moon phases kind of cause them to have a lack of sleep, or it changes their kind of rhythms in some kind of way, right? Correlations of things. Now, I asked you to imagine that this lunation cycle is now the sun. So just imagine the sun touches the point in the zodiac. Imagine for a moment that the zodiac around the Earth isn't to do with signs and characters, but for a moment it's a ruler. It's a geometric ruler, like trigonometry, right? Like maths. So a circle is 360 degrees. The 360 degrees is divided into 12 sections of 30 degrees. And all you're doing is using the movement of planets through the zodiac as a location device to know exactly where it is, just for a minute. So devoid of meaning, it's just a thing to locate things. So when the sun is conjunct your sun and you're having your astrological birthday, by the way, the solar return can sometimes happen the day before your birthday or the day after. And that's because our human counting calendar is inaccurate. We know this because every 4 years there's a leap year to readjust it. It's not the case that all the planets go, ready guys, here you on a leap year. That doesn't happen. It's just because the human counting isn't accurate enough. And so the calendar goes squiffy and it goes out of line with the cosmos. So they reposition it back in. So on the day of your solar return, you might find that you have a good feeling. Today is your day of celebration. Of course it is. And you might have a good vibe coming on. When the sun moves, now 30 degrees is one sign of the zodiac. So when the sun is a sign of the zodiac after your birthday, or possibly even a sign of the zodiac before your birthday, you might find that there's a sort of an irritant taking place in your life. Some things are a bit, not problematical, but a bit sort of sand in the shoe rather than a stone in the shoe sort of thing. Right? 2 months before your birthday, 2 months after your birthday, you might find things are going rather smoothly as a kind of an annual rhythm in your life. There's a possibility that when the sun is 3 signs away from your birthday, or in other words, 90 degrees from its start point, before and after, there are challenges in life. Things happen. You have to get things done. Things aren't as easy. They're not flowing as smoothly as you might like. And you also, all the way up, you might find that things are kind of easier a bit after that. And then when the sun is opposite your birthday, that sometimes you might be at a low ebb. That time of year is a challenging year, or it's a time of year when you're a bit flat. Has anyone noticed that if you think of the year as a wheel for a minute, and you kind of know where your birthday is, right? So then you think 6 months opposite that, wherever it lands. Is there some kind of pattern that you notice for around that time of year? You know,
I do, definitely.
like
Yeah.
like for some people, it's always September's, or for other people, it's always May. That's the thing, that, you know. So one person's got that.
Yeah.
Yes.
I do.
Yeah, 2 people have found that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't see a pattern with mine.
Say that again, please.
I can't see a pattern with mine. I don't think so.
No? Okay. Well, a couple of people have found it.
Me either.
Yeah. So it's something for you to monitor and watch, right? Is there a solar rhythm that takes place? And is it like a tide? And you can just kind of, now it's much easier to work with a tide when you understand it. I tend to find. So if you know that there's a kind of time of year in your annual rhythm where things get a bit tricky on an annual basis, it's a bit like knowing that there's going to be, weather, rain. So you can kind of take a brolly out with you just to make sure that you can adjust things. If you know it's going to rain, then that's the time to not have a picnic. I'm going to ask those of you who live in the UK a question, right? And I'd like you to kind of respond to this. I'm going to say a word, and I want you to just let me know the first picture that comes to your head. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Glastonbury Rock Festival. What's the picture you got in your head?
Mud.
Mud and wellies.
Mud and wellies.
Music.
Yeah.
Music.
Yeah.
Crowds.
Do you remember that before they put a roof on Wimbledon, they were forced to put a roof on Wimbledon. There wasn't a roof on Wimbledon for years and years and years and years and years, until something happened. In one of the days that it rained, a man called Cliff Richard stood up and sang lots of songs in a PA microphone. And after that, they put a roof on it. I'm not suggesting they did that in response to good old Cliff, but it's just a funny coincidence that they didn't do it before, right? Why did they spend all that money putting a roof on Wimbledon? Because it's a bit odd, isn't it? When you think about it, it always rains at Glastonbury. That's the kind of picture we have in our head. And then 2 weeks later, it's Wimbledon, and it rains at Wimbledon as well. It always seems to rain when the sun is moving through the water sign of Cancer. Isn't that a funny coincidence? It always seems to rain when the sun is moving through the water sign of Cancer. A couple of weeks later, when the sun's in Leo, it's sunny for a month. August is sun and the corn in the wind, and we're on the beach and da-da-da-da-da. Why don't they have Glastonbury then? Why do they keep booking Glastonbury and Wimbledon in the rainy season? Is it that the gods don't like Glastonbury and the gods make it rain? Or is it just that rain's going to happen anyway and they're trying to have a picnic when in the rainy bit? I don't know. But if they paid any attention to the annual rhythm of the year and the notation of the sun going through a water sign, it might just be the case that they would find that that's what they're doing. They're pitching their tent in a watery period. Possibly. It is, I mentioned the ancient Greeks. It doesn't happen now because the BBC changed contract, but for about 30 years, at the end of BBC news bulletins, it would always say weather is supplied by the Met Office. Has anybody noticed that? Weather is supplied by the Met Office. Yeah? Okay. And do you know what Met stands for?
Next person.
Meteorological.
Meteorological.
Say that again.
Meteorological.
Meteorological. Now we know that the ology, it stands for a body of knowledge. So biology is knowledge of the body, geology is knowledge of rock, and ology is a body of knowledge. And when you look at this image, you can't help but see this flying in from the left-hand side, right? A meteor is a moving star. So for decades, the BBC would say at the end of its news bulletins, the weather is supplied by the Office of the Knowledge of the Moving Stars. That's what meteorological means, right? And it comes from ancient Greece. The ancient Greeks used to use astrology for weather forecasting. The ancient Greeks saw planets as symbols of hot, cold, wet, or dry, and signs of the zodiac representing hot, cold, wet, or dry. So when a hot planet is moving through a watery sign, in the winter, you'll get floods, but in the summer, you'll get thunderstorms, because it's always season context dependent. When I first found this out, I was doing the MA, and someone said, "Oh, so and so, yeah, he might come in the car tomorrow. Then again, he might be on his motorbike." And someone looked at their computer on their phone and said, "Oh, it's going to come on his bike." And I said, "Oh, how do you know that?" "Well, it's going to be sunny tomorrow." "Oh, what, you're looking at the weather forecast?" "No, I just looked at the chart for tomorrow." "The chart for tomorrow?" "Yeah." And so then I discovered something I didn't know, and that was that people used to use astrology for weather forecasting, right? And when I came across this, Saturn, the planet of extreme cold, was moving through Cancer, a water sign. That summer, Boscastle happened. Hurricane Katrina happened in New Orleans. It seemed like everything was awash with water. This is in 2004. And I had a quick look, and I noticed that next up, of course, Saturn is going to go through Leo, the sign of dramatic heat. But 2005 would begin with Saturn in Cancer, and it was only until about the spring that Saturn would move into Leo. So that means the year begins on a watery basis. 2006 would be the year that it would begin on a hot basis. So in 2004, when everything's all drippy wet, I sent an email to people in my network, before Facebook, saying 2006, it's going to be so hot in the UK. The UK are going to be constantly referring to 1976, and they'll be talking about Chateau de Marlborough. People sent me messages saying, you're nuts, you're crazy. Look, have you looked out the window, right? You know, all the fields are flooded and stuff like this. 2006, everyone's going, oh my God, it's as hot as 1976. And all this sort of thing. And in the middle of all that heat, I sent a message out to people saying, next year is going to be unpredictably cold. And there might be floods as well, when Saturn went through Virgo. And that's exactly what happened. Now, the referencing to 1976, how many years is it between 1976 and 2006?
40.
Not quite. No, it's 30.
30.
Yeah. And how many years does it take for Saturn to go around the sun?
Must be 30.
It's 29 and a half. Yeah. And if you look back at weather records, you find that there was a heat wave in 1947 as well. And Saturn was in Leo at the time. There was a magazine called Indie Shaman, and I did an article for them about weather forecasting with astrology. And so I did the first article. It's 3 articles. The first one was the overall gist of it. The second article was the technique of how to do it, but also a prediction, because they said, wouldn't it be cool if you did an article about it, made a prediction for somewhere that we can all find on the weather map, like Bath. So we picked on Bath. And that date, the date of the prediction would fall in between kind of issue 2 and issue 3. So then in issue 3, the editor could report on how accurate or not the weather forecast was. So with a deep breath, I kind of looked at the date that was chosen by the editor, worked out the weather forecast for the moment, sent it off, and they reported it was exactly spot on. There wasn't any variation at all. It was so to be able to do a weather forecast prediction months in advance is very useful. If you have picnics, if you have barbecues, if you run tours of Stonehenge, it's very useful to be able to look at dates in advance and kind of have a rough idea of what the weather's going to be like, even a year ahead. Wouldn't it be useful? Yeah.
Wedding.
Oh, all sorts of things. Yeah. Any kind of outdoor thing. It's always useful. Or even kind of knowing whether or not there'll be snow in the winter. What kind of winter it's going to be. Is it going to be a wet winter, a dry winter, a cold winter? Yes, Lily?
2022 was a very hot summer in the UK. Was there anything astrologically that caused that?
No, because it doesn't cause it. It correlates with it.
Correlates, yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember what now, but there were kind of things suggesting, there were extremes of heat. Saturn was going through Aquarius, which is a dry. Yes, it represents dryness, and Mars, the movement of Mars as well. So Saturn is a planet that represents extreme cold. Mars is a planet that represents heat. So you look at the combination of the two and the dynamics between them. And all the other planets, of course, also have, some are moist, some are dry. It's complex. But still, it's a very interesting kind of notion when you think about it. Now, back to our diagram here. So we have some ideas of angular relationship.
May I quickly ask what quincunx was?
Yeah, I'm just going to get to that. Yeah. So angular relationship. Now, by the way, I can't see all your face again, Lily. You've sunk.
I'm trying to look at the picture. That's why I'm looking close.
Move the angle of your device, and there you go. Now, think of the word aspect means to see, right? It means to see. Okay. An easy way of thinking of this: imagine you've got a row of terraced houses in a street, and there's another street adjacent to them. So you've got, two streets, and their back gardens meet. Right? And just imagine that none of the back gardens have fences, wooden fences. They all have wire fences. So you can clearly see all the back gardens of all the houses in the row adjacent to yours. Right? So if this is your back garden here, you can easily see your neighbors directly opposite. Yeah, they're right in front of you. So your back garden meets their back garden here, and you can see them. Right? You can kind of see these ones. That's quite clear. You've got a bit of a view of these ones here at 120 degrees. But these ones here, if you're standing like looking rigid, like not turning your head, but you're just standing rigid, at the corner of your eye, you can see these guys, but it's a bit of a strain. You can see these guys. That's a bit of a strain. These two, you can kind of see, but these two are really hard to see because they're almost next to you, right? So that's one way of thinking about relationship between one object and another object, and that certain angles have a sense of ease and other angles have a sense of challenge or difficulty, right? Just from how you can see and look at things. That's a good lead-in to understanding the principle of aspects. So it's not just that a planet is in a sign, and it's not just that a planet is in a particular house. It's also that a planet is in some kind of relationship with the other celestial objects as well. So a lot of people are born with the sun in Gemini. A lot of people are born with the moon in Sagittarius. But not everybody's born with the sun in Gemini, with the moon in Sagittarius, making an opposition, and that Venus is square and something else is semi-sextile, etc. The actual patterning in an astrological birth chart is utterly unique. It never replicates. Even twins have differences in their birth charts in the angular relationships. The quincunx is the English name given to two planets that are 150 degrees away from each other. The Americans call it an inconjunct because possibly of a dyslexia spelling of the name, or it's sounding rude. Okay, so you find some astrological textbooks called it an inconjunct. Older English books will call it a quincunx. Okay, how's that so far? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Good.
Yeah? Okay, right. We're getting close to tea break now. All right. Yeah, I know this class is slightly shorter than the others. Oh my God. Well, it might not be quite, but have a look at this. Now, just to kind of give you another way of thinking about how astrology relates with us, right? I want you to imagine that these goblets here represent dynamics of water. Or in other words, they represent dynamics of the unconscious. And in astrology, we can think of the unconscious as having three principal zones or regions or depths. There's a surface, then there's a deeper depth in the stem of the goblet, and then there's the other depth where the goblets meet and connect. Okay, so there's a surface level of the unconscious. This represents the area of where we have memories stored that we can access. So if someone asked you about a holiday when you were 10 years old, if you can find it in your memory, even after searching for a minute or two, that means it's in the accessible memory area. Yeah. The stem of the goblets in this illustration represents repressed material. These are memories that you cannot remember because your unconscious has assigned them into an amnesia box, which we'll discuss much more about next time on day 5. The stem, the base of the goblets reach out and connect and blend into others. This is referred to by Carl Jung as the collective unconscious. Carl Jung has this notion that the unconscious doesn't just remain, in a sense, inside your skull. It extends beyond the human skin, or beyond what a beautiful phrasing that Susportis uses, which is beyond the skin encapsulated ego. Isn't that a wonderful phrase? Beyond the skin encapsulated ego. Right? And that to a certain extent, we can reach into and or reach from the collective unconscious of other people. And astrology can describe what things we can upload to the collective unconscious and also what things we download from the collective unconscious, if you want to think of it like that.
That's amazing. I mean,
yeah,
as a concept.
It is indeed. You know, I often like to use the illustration of a dodgem car. Imagine there's dodgem cars in the fairground, and all the dodgem cars have been given a sense of consciousness, right? So they all have self-awareness, and they're all having chat, and all the dodgem cars think they're individuals. So they're going on a bash, and the yellow one's bashing the green one, and the red one's bashing the blue one, and they're going round and round, whizzy round. But they're all connected to the great grid. And it's the great grid from which they get their energy. But they don't know that because they all think they're just a dodgem car. So think of the collective unconscious as the great grid into which we supply information from our experiences, but also from which we receive. All right.
That's a really brilliant way of explaining it. I've never heard that before. That's brilliant. Thank you.
It's a pleasure. I do have a childlike clarity, you know. Now, the interesting thing is that this surface level of the unconscious, where we have accessible memories, is represented in the astrological birth chart by the moon. And now, when I say it's represented by the moon, I mean the condition of the moon. And the condition means its sign, its house, and all of the angular relationships from all of the other planets to it. All of that is the condition of the moon. Right? That complex patterning is the condition of the moon. And by looking at a person's moon, the condition of the moon in their chart, I know what kind of memories they can find, what kind of things have influenced or affected their accessible memory. The sign Cancer, where you whereabouts in the wheel you find Cancer, that part of the chart will also have accessible memory dynamics. And the fourth house in a birth chart will have more information about their general unconscious, the kind of scripting they got in childhood, and the kind of things that they can find when they think about their kind of memories working. Okay? Rather cool, isn't it? Mm. If you do any kind of...
Do all the psychologists know about this?
Well, it's an interesting thing that when I used to go and do talks for people at a health spa, this very expensive health spa, quite often there'd be about 30 women in the room and I'd be talking about this kind of stuff. And someone invariably would have done psychology somewhere. And one woman asked me, oh, where did you study psychology? I said, I never studied it formally. She said, well, you sound like you have. Yeah, I said, yeah, I know. She said, where did you get your information? I said, astrology books. And the look on her face was just a picture, you know.
Yeah.
And it, you know, what made it even worse, it was only primarily 2 astrology books, and that was the 12 Houses and Kara Hammaker-Zondag's Psychological Astrology. And just those 2 things with a bit of Martin Schulman and kind of, you know, but with some Rowan added as well. Now, this stem here, this repressed stuff, in an astrological birth chart is represented by the condition of Pluto, where the sign Scorpio touches, and planets and signs in the 8th house. This is profoundly interesting if you do any kind of work with people, or if you do any kind of self-exploration and you want to understand the dynamics of what the drives within a person or the deeper drives within yourself. Because these things are repressed, that also means merely discussing them will stimulate the release of repressed material. If you are looking for repressed material, this is called illumination or an epiphany. Right? If you're not looking for illumination, this is called crisis, because when repressed material comes up into the body, it's experienced as incredibly powerful and deeply painful. Can I just say, Lily, there's something hovering in the top left corner of your, that's it. It's like a red thing floating about.
It's a rose on it's a petals.
Yeah,
on
right.
lights.
It's creating a lot of kind of distraction in the video. So I'm just going to switch your thing off, okay?
It's gone. It's gone.
No, I went and did that. Oh, right. So anyway, sorry, it's dazzling my eye. You'll find out why that happens later. So when we even just discuss things that have been repressed, what can happen is that repressed material comes up into the person's body. And if they're not expecting it, it can be powerful and it can seem like a crisis. So in the moment of an astrological interpretation, to begin to discuss these parts of a chart is the equivalent of Morris dancing on their buttons, right? It's just like using their triggers like a xylophone, and just anything can pop up or come out. Now, if that's what you want to happen, it's a very good way of getting that to happen. If it's not what you want to happen, then you have a problem. And when I started doing astrology readings, I've been doing tarot readings for about 2 years before. So I was used to talking to people. And because I'd read a bit of kind of psychology and stuff when I was about 13, I knew about a phenomenon called false memory syndrome. Is anyone aware of what false memory syndrome is?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah? Is anyone here who hasn't heard of that?
I haven't.
Okay. False memory syndrome suggests that when the human mind imagines something, so you're having a fantasy or a daydream, right, that there are parts of the mind where memories are stored, and there are parts of the mind where we have fantasy and the ability to conjure something new. If a person has an imagining and it slips across into memory, then the person remembers the fantasy as having really happened. False memory syndrome. And the notion of that is used by a lot of defense lawyers in cases of historic child sex abuse. Because as soon as they suggest that the victim has false memory, it's very difficult to prove or disprove that. Because then it's like everything you say is just a reinforcement of the illusion. You know, it's a rather insipid thing for defense lawyers to do, you know, but they're paid to do that. And it's just, yeah. So if you're going to use symbols to describe someone's life, then that means you have to talk about their history and their life without suggesting things that could be false memory. So when the Me Too thing happened in 2017, I was not surprised at all. By the time I'd done about 4 or 5 years of tarot and then astrology with people, I got to a point where I felt guilty. I felt terrible for being a man because I was one of them. And I'm in the grouping of these brutal, sadistic bastards. The way that they treat women and girls is horrific. And I remember things parents have told me decades afterwards. I'm haunted by some of the stuff I've heard. You know, when something appears in a newspaper, it's described loosely because they don't want copycats. But when someone's in a client situation and they're telling you details, you know, I go for the ride on that, and it hurts.
It must do.
Yeah, indeed. But that's part of the what's necessary to help a person, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I found a way to be able to kind of avoid specifying something is to give a person a really broad menu. Right? So I've been doing astrology readings for about 2 weeks. So it's literally like just 32 years ago last month, right? And this woman came to see me. I was about 27, she's about 25. And she had a particular thing in her chart, a certain planet in Scorpio. And I said to her, yes, this suggests that when you were between 14 and 21, you could have had some particularly arduous, difficult, powerful circumstances. And she said, oh yeah. I said, yeah. I said, the astrology suggests you could have been pushed around. Now, I don't know in what way you were pushed around. You could have been pushed around religiously, economically, psychologically, sexually, socially. I have no idea in what way, but it does look like that. And she said, arduous time. And I said, yeah. She said, do you mean like the time that I was gang raped by my stepfather and his friends? And I said, yeah, that would count as an arduous time. She looked me straight in the eye and said, so how do I trust men now? And I thought, I have a problem. My problem was that I didn't know what to do or say. So I thought I need training. So I took myself off and I looked at different hypnotherapy courses because I played with hypnosis when I was about 19. And someone suggested I meet this man called Michael Harrison, who is teaching this eclectic mix of hypnotherapy with NLP, with a field called psychobiology, the work of Ernest Lawrence Rossi. And we got on like house on fire. And he taught me, and then he retired and gave me the copyright to his training material. And I still teach that stuff now. I call it neuroholistic therapy. So I found that doing the act of reading a person's chart at depth means that stuff comes up. And you can refer them to a therapist at that point, or you can be the therapist at the same time, which means having a dual skill base, the astrology plus some kind of therapeutic intervention thing that you can do, so that when things do come up, you can attend to them in the moment, and therefore kind of help the person to reconcile or find resolution or find healing, or illumination just for something new. And sometimes it's a good beginning to be able to know that something was and is no more, that something is in the past and it's not in the present anymore. Other people find the fact that there's an astrological pattern that correlates with something enables them to feel that they have verity, that they have merit in the world. You know, again, in those very early days, this businessman came to have a reading with me, and he was a distinguished kind of business guy, you know, kind of suit and tie, green temples. I'm there, scruffy as anything, 27 years old, smoking away, you know. And we're looking at this beautiful birth chart in the middle of this screen. And there's a symbol in astrology that represents individualism and difference. And this individualism and difference symbol was in a part of his chart called the 8th house, which is Scorpio's natural house. And it happens to be the house of repression, but also where we find intimacy and also where we repress things, all bundled into one happy stroke unhappy place, depending on your relationship with that stuff. So I said to this guy something quite, I looked at the symbol and I thought, oh, right, what's he doing? Is he swinging from the chandelier in a rubber outfit? I have no idea, right? Because in my tarot world, I bumped into all kinds of people who do all kinds of things with all kinds of people, right? And you need a broad mind and an open kind of frame to do this stuff with humanity. Literally, you could bump into anything from you know, Olympus to Auschwitz. That's the range. And so I said to this guy, it looks like you have an alternative approach to relationships and relating. And he said, an alternative approach to relationships and relating. I said, yeah. And he said, where'd you get that? So I touched the screen and said, just there, this bit here. And he went, right. And he looked at me, he said, so that tells you that I have an alternative approach to relationships and relating. I said, yeah. And he said, so you're telling me that when God spanned the dice of the universe in the beginning, that these lumps of rock slowed and they formed patterns. And when I took my first breath, this lump of rock spun by God was there. And that tells you that I have an alternative relationship to approach to relationships. And I said, yeah, thinking that's good. I'm going to remember that. I like that description, right? And the look on his face, it was like a cloud lifted. He looked illuminated. He looked serene. It was like years of, I don't know, some kind of tension that just sort of fallen off him. And I realized in that moment, oh, he's gay. Because all his life he's been told that God says that you're demonic. God says you have no value. God says this or that about you, right?
Oh.
But now, instead of listening to the man who wears a dress with an invisible friend in the church, he's now looking at God's universe. And God's universe says it's all right to be you we are. God's universe says, in my design, you have an alternative relationship to relationships.
Mm.
Wow. I thought in that moment, this stuff has some value for it. You know? Goodness me. Yes. Now,
Yeah, that's brilliant, David.
yeah, I think so too. I love this stuff. It even says in my chart that I love this stuff, but of course it would, right? Anyway, this collective unconscious, synonymous with Pisces and Neptune and the 12th house. I had a class in the days when I used to do things physically and not online in about 1997. And we used to meet on a Saturday, one Saturday a month. And it just so happened that on a particular Saturday, we were going to begin discussing the planet Neptune. And it happened to be the Saturday of Princess Diana's funeral. So I suggested to the class that we watch the funeral as an example of Neptune in action. A lot of people were experiencing bereavement, even though they'd never met Princess Diana. How can they be experiencing such a loss when they haven't lost anything? So how come there's this sense of loss, and how come there's this feeling like a wave of people releasing bereavement from all sorts of things in their lives, stimulated by this sort of collective sense of things? It happens on lesser levels, like when the Beatles split up or Take That split up, that kind of thing. But this was bigger, right? This was moving, and it was moving around the planet. as well. It was a wonderful example of the collective unconscious. This Friday is the anniversary, the first anniversary, of a day that was particularly dreadful for many, many people. Russia invaded Ukraine. President Putin appeared on television like a Bond villain, but doing it really well. And he said things that sent ripples of fear through the world, the democratic world. If you try and stop us, you will experience things more terrible than you've seen in any of your histories, in a very serious face, right? And that sent a ripple through the collective unconscious as well. So collective unconscious dynamics aren't always sweet and fluffy. They can be demonic as well. But what you can find out in a birth chart is specifically how it affects you. Because there could be a load of people really interested in a football match and a load of other people who aren't even aware it's happening. Right? When I was about 16, I was in a band, or trying to be in a band, and one of the music papers of the day, Enemy or Melody Maker or something, had this kind of feature about fame, about being in the band. One of the ones was about fame. And it said, at the moment, it takes something like 250,000 sales of a record to be #1 in the British charts at that time. And that was less than half the population of Birmingham. So you could have a #1 single, walk down a street in Birmingham, and no one's heard of it. And that puts fame in a perspective for me, you know. The zeitgeist and things, they're actually small pockets, what we now call echo chambers, you know, in social media. So the collective unconscious, just because a lot of people are having a good time or a bad time, it doesn't mean that that's what you kind of tune into, you know. So by looking at the planets and signs in your 12th house, where Neptune is in your chart, the condition of Neptune, you can get an idea of the flavor or the sense of things that you can draw in from the collective unconscious, but also what you put out into it from yourself. What do you think of the ability to do all that with just mere astrology?
I mean, this is why I'm studying this, because I'm in a therapy setting, and I just can't imagine in the future that you wouldn't look at a chart before you see your client. Yeah.
Well, you'd be standing on the shoulders of giants if you do that. Carl Jung wrote to Sigmund Freud on at least 2 occasions about astrology. In one letter, he said that astrology represents the sum total of knowledge of psychology of antiquity. And in another letter, he said that he looked at the astrological birth chart of every new client before their first session.
That's my guy.
So, you know, yes, standing on the shoulders of giants indeed. Okay, have you enjoyed this first part of our 4th?
Very much. Very much.
It's excellent, David.
Yeah.
As
Thank
always.
you.
Cool. Good. Now, we're going to have a tea break in a minute. Right. When we come back from tea break, we're going to discuss some things that might be interesting and illuminating, because we're going to have some conversations about esoteric philosophy. Right?
Yeah.
Some of these are all pertinent to the birth chart. In other words, they're all pertinent to our own lives as well. I have no idea what your beliefs are. I have no idea what your experiences in life are. Right? So some of the things that we discuss might be a little bit tender. So just be mindful of that. Okay? Yes, and I'll do my best to kind of lead into it as softly and as gently as I can. All right? But I also am a human being, and I've had ups days and down days too. And so, you know, you're not the only ones that have had such things. Life is an undulating wave. And life goes through seasons of winters. We have emotional winters, we have emotional springs, emotional summers. We're in the height of love, and then it all fades into an autumn. And then we see the depth of winter coming towards us. We try and avoid it. But if you avoid the pain of winter, you can't get to the bridge of spring. So you have to go through winter in order to get from decay to growth. That's the beauty of Winter's Longest Night, is that it's the turning point. You know, but
Our
sometimes
friends Saturn and Pluto, my two favorite ones.
yeah, well, I once wrote the phrase that a person experiences a fleeting moment of eternal darkness. And that's what it's like, a fleeting moment of eternal darkness. Ultimately, everything we experience is only lifelong. And that's a blink of an eye to a Canadian redwood tree, you know, in the grand scheme of things. And it's the grand scheme of things that we're going to have a chat about after tea. Okay? Yeah, so I shall see you in 10. Put your things on mute for while we have a tea break, and I'll catch you in a moment. Bye.
Thank you, David. Thank you.
Thank you for watching this fascinating window into the nature of being human through this fine and ancient art of astrology. It is truly a pleasure to share these astro adventures with you, and please ensure you like and subscribe and continue exploring. Auto Q05, take 4. Thank you for watching this fascinating window into the nature of being human through this fine and ancient art of astrology. It's truly a pleasure to share these astro adventures with you, and please ensure you like and subscribe and continue exploring the deepening wisdom and illumination that resides within the art of Rowan astrology. Until next time, I wish you peace and good health, and please take very good care of you. Bye-bye.